Have you ever heard of Max Stirner? Probably not. He was one of the most controversial thinkers to ever live, but he wasn't a philosopher or a scientist, but rather an author. But his work had a profound impact on philosophy, science, religion, politics, art, and even love. And he's been called the most dangerous man in history. So who is this guy and why is he so controversial? Max Stirner was born in Germany in 1806 to a family with a long line of rabbis going back several generations. His father was a bookseller who sold religious texts, and from the time he was young, he showed great intellectual promise. In fact, at age 13, he wrote a play that was performed in front of the king. It was a huge hit, and it seemed like Max would follow in the footsteps of his father and become a rabbi. But then something interesting happened. After attending university for a year, he abandoned his studies and spent the next 3 years traveling around Europe. And during his travels, he met two people who changed his life forever. The first was Johann Gottlieb Fichte, arguably the most influential German philosopher. And the second was a woman named August. Yes, that was her real name. We don't know much about her, but it seems she was older than Max and already married. Regardless, Max became enamored with her and wanted to marry her. But when he proposed, she rejected him because she didn't want to leave her current husband. This devastated Max, and he began to feel hopeless about the future. That is until he met Fichte, who offered him some advice that completely changed his worldview. According to Fichte, the ultimate source of knowledge and morality was not God or tradition, but rather the individual. This was extremely radical at the time. Most of the world believed that they derive their morals and values from a higher being, but Fichte claimed that we create our own values and are responsible for creating our own meaning in life. And this completely revolutionized the way Max saw the world. He realized that he could no longer rely on God or tradition to provide him with guidance. Instead, he needed to find his own path in life. So after hearing this advice, what did Max do? He took it to heart and decided to dedicate his life to achieving happiness. This led him to write one of the most important philosophical works of all time, The Ego and Its Own, or The Unique and Its Property, which we'll just call The Ego and Its Own. In it, he outlined his theory of egoism, which is often confused with selfishness. But although they sound similar, they mean very different things. To understand what Stirner meant by egoism, let's take a look at the problems he identified with society at the time. As he saw it, there were two main: alienation and selflessness. First, alienation. Although Max lived over 200 years ago, have you ever felt like you don't really belong anywhere? You may have a job, a family, a country, but deep down you feel like you're an outsider. Like you don't truly fit in or connect with anyone. You feel alone, even though you're surrounded by people. Well, if you've ever felt this way, you're experiencing what Max saw as the biggest problem in society: alienation. So what causes alienation? According to Max, it's anything that prevents us from living authentically, anything that prevents us from being our true selves. This includes things like social norms, traditions, and ideas, but also emotions like guilt and shame. Think about how many times you've done something that you knew you shouldn't do, only to feel guilty afterwards. Even though you know deep down that nothing bad actually happened, you can't shake the feeling that you did something wrong. Or maybe you felt ashamed for not conforming to social norms. Like maybe you're someone who doesn't enjoy drinking alcohol or playing sports, even though most people do. Well, these types of emotions, guilt and shame, are what Max referred to as spooks, because they prevent us from acting according to our own will and keep us alienated from ourselves and others. And this brings us to the second problem Max saw in society: selflessness. He noticed that people regularly put the needs of others before their own, and he believed this was a mistake. Now, don't get me wrong, Max was not a selfish person. In fact, He was known for his generosity and willingness to help others. But he believed that helping others should come from a place of personal fulfillment, not obligation or guilt. He felt that many people were so caught up in trying to please others and conform to social norms that they had lost sight of their own happiness. They had become selfless to such an extent that they had forgotten about themselves. So how could Max solve these problems? According to him, the solution lay in embracing our true nature, which he described as the unique one. The unique one is essentially our true self, the part of us that feels alienated from society and longs to be free from the spooks that hold us back. For Max, the unique one was synonymous with God, since he believed that the concept of God was simply a way of describing the human ego. This, of course, made him extremely controversial, since for centuries people had been killing each other in the name of God. And now he was saying that God was actually just an aspect of our own mind. So how does the unique one relate to egoism? Well, egoism is essentially the practice of following one's unique one, of living in accordance with our true self. It means setting aside what society tells us we should do and instead focusing on what we truly desire. It means recognizing our own worth and understanding that we are more than just our relationships or social status. When we embrace egoism, we become less alienated from ourselves and others, and we begin to live a life that is more true to ourselves. But this is where things get a little complicated, because for Max, egoism was not just a philosophical idea. It was a way of life. He believed that we should apply the same principles to our romantic relationships, and that meant that he rejected traditional gender roles and the idea that women were inferior to men. In fact, he believed that women should be treated as equals and that they should have the same rights and opportunities as men. He also believed that we should not feel guilty for pursuing our own happiness, even if it meant going against social norms or the expectations of others. And he encouraged people to pursue whatever they desired, whether it was money, power, or even love. This, of course, was extremely controversial at the time. Most people believed that women were inferior to men and that they should be subservient to their husbands. And Max was basically saying that this was wrong and that women should be treated as equals. He was even more radical in his views on love. Max believed that we should pursue whatever we desire and that this applied to love as well. If we wanted to have multiple partners, then we should do so. If we didn't want to conform to traditional gender roles, then we should break free from them. In short, Max believed that we should be free to love whoever we wanted and however we wanted without feeling guilty or ashamed. But this was not well received by society. In fact, it got Max into a lot of trouble. Eventually, he was forced to flee Germany, and he spent the rest of his life in exile. He died believing that his ideas would eventually be accepted, but it would take many years for this to happen. Today, his ideas are seen as revolutionary, and he is considered to be one of the most important thinkers of the 20th century. But it took many years for his ideas to be accepted and even longer for them to be understood. So why is Stirner so controversial? Well, it's because he challenged everything. He questioned traditional gender roles. He rejected the idea of women being inferior to men, and he believed that we should pursue our own happiness above all else. He was a true revolutionary, and his ideas continue to inspire people today. Now, here's the thing. You probably won't find any other videos on YouTube that discuss Max Stirner and his philosophy. That's because most people don't understand his ideas, let alone have the courage to share them. The truth is that Max Stirner was a genius, but he was a genius who was misunderstood by his contemporaries. It was until decades after his death that people began to appreciate the depth of his thought and the originality of his ideas. If you want to learn more about Max Stirner, I highly recommend reading his book, The Ego and Its Own. It's a short, easy read, and it will change the way you think about the world. Just be warned, you may never see things the same way again. Thanks for watching.